Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. Back in 2017, when I sat down with Vulfpeck mastermind Jack Stratton for this podcast, I asked him about the room where, at that time, his band seemed to be recording most of their music and making most of their videos, too. Where was that place? What was that place? Why did he want to work there? This is what he told me.
That's our friend Tyler Duncan, who's a Michigan guy, incredible musician, and built his own little home studio in the basement there, which was perfect because...
In L.A.?
In Michigan.
It's in Michigan?
In Ann Arbor, yeah. And it's perfect because it is a living room, which is our thing. That's where we get the best results.
In Ann Arbor. So
yeah.
You guys all have to go back to Ann Arbor,
yeah.
Into your friend's basement,
yeah.
to make these records that you're making.
Yeah, and we're all allergic to cats, and he has a cat, and it's just a mess, yeah. But I'm working on my cat allergy, Dr. Furman.
Diet. Then Jack briefly got hung up on how to cure his cat allergies through diet, but we got back on track talking about Ann Arbor and Tyler Duncan. I was particularly curious about this because I was under the impression that at that time, Vulfpeck was based in L.A., so I asked him about the individual members of the band, where they were, like Theo Katzman and Joe Dart.
Yeah, we love going to Ann Arbor and getting together. It's kind of the most natural fit for us.
Is everybody in L.A. most of the time?
No, just me and Theo.
Where's Joe?
Joe's in Ann Arbor, yeah. He tours. Tyler had an Irish band that would do a lot of work.
Okay, so Joe Dart, the already legendary bass player in Vulfpeck, also played in an Irish band with Tyler Duncan. The next year, I sat down with Joe Dart himself in an Airbnb in Paris to talk for the podcast, and he ended up telling me a little more about Tyler as well.
Ann Arbor is still our favorite place to hang out and record because our buddy Tyler Duncan has a great home studio there. There's just this nostalgia. We all still love hanging out in Ann Arbor, especially like Michigan in like the fall. It's just great. It's great. So we've had great results.
Okay, I was getting it. Great results with Tyler Duncan in the house in Ann Arbor. Tyler Duncan had an Irish band called the Olam. I was understanding. And then over the course of subsequent interviews with pretty much everyone else I could find related to Vulfpeck, each person in their own way told me about how I needed to talk to Tyler Duncan, and that he was also, remarkably, a very accomplished Irish flute player. But did I listen? No, I did not. When Theo Katzman's fantastic record Modern Johnny Sings came out in 2020, filled with songs that totally reoriented my thinking about what it means to be a contemporary songwriter, I noticed that Tyler Duncan had recorded and produced it. Next thing you know, Tyler Duncan's name starts showing up as part of the production team on the videos made by Scary Pockets. Before you know it, the singer Antwaun Stanley is releasing a collaborative project called Ascension with none other than Tyler Duncan. His name was Tyler Duncan. Showing up everywhere. And that's when I knew what I needed to do. I had to listen to Tyler's Irish band. Despite the overwhelming consensus that it was important to listen to Tyler Duncan's Irish band, that it was a great band, that he was a great Irish flute player, that Tyler Duncan's Irish project is worth checking out, I didn't do it. And that was a mistake. It's because of my own, I guess, musical prejudices? I'm not sure. But I was wrong. And I'm here to tell you I made a mistake. Because I think the Olam, which is Tyler's Irish band, is some of my favorite music that I discovered this year. It's so unique, so hip, so seductive and warm, inviting, unusual, but also familiar. I just love it. I don't need to tell you too much else about Tyler because he's about to tell you everything you need to know in this conversation. But I will say he's a thoughtful, very creative, and sensitive producer, songwriter, and musician. I just loved talking to him, finally after all these years of hearing his name. Third-story.com is the place for you to go to sign up, subscribe, get involved, check out the archive, all the Vulf and Vulf adjacent episodes, as well as talks with fantastic engineers and producers too. Big thanks and love to Louis Cato, a former guest of the podcast as well, for connecting me and Tyler. At the website, you'll also find a Spotify playlist and some YouTube clips related to the conversation today. And then it's patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast if you want to support the project on a deeper level. Here's me and Tyler Duncan talking it down. How you doing, Tyler? It's nice to meet you. I feel like I'm looking at the room that kind of first drew my attention to you in the first place. Is that the fourth position Corey Wong Vulfpeck room that I'm looking at behind you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is where, I mean, a lot of videos are down here. A lot of Vulfpeck videos. There's a funny story about it too. Maybe we can talk about it for the podcast. There's a funny story about the furniture that's in this room as it relates to Vulfpeck.
We're doing it right now. Let's talk.
Oh, okay. Are we doing it now?
Yeah.
Smooth transition.
We just started doing it.
What a crossfade.
I remember when I talked to Jack Stratton years ago, he's the first person who told me about you.
Oh, really?
All the videos were still from Michigan. You know, it was before they had started recording anything in LA. They hadn't done any of the sort of later stage Vulfpeck stuff. So everything kind of took place in this room. And I had envisioned it as a basement room. I said, what basement is that? And he said, it's not a basement. It's our friend Tyler's living room. And we go there and we suffer because he's got cats and we're allergic, but we still do it anyway. And that's the first time I heard your name. And it's the first time I kind of understood that there was this quiet influence that was coming from you that actually reached out to that whole generation of cats. You know, it was before I knew that you had worked on Theo's solo records. It was before I knew about the projects that you had done in college and, you know, and how that all kind of intertwined. All I really knew was the room behind you.
Totally. In the living room, not even the studio. Because at that time, in those really early Vulfpeck videos, I was building this studio while they were doing those videos upstairs. So, you know, then that transitioned to them recording videos down here. But yeah, the living room videos, this was just a concrete shell at that point.
So let's talk about it. First, do you want to tell me the furniture story or should we get there later?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the funny thing is that, so for their, I got this email from this person who was, I found out, their set designer for the Madison Square Garden show. And she had this wild idea of like, what if we recreate your studio on stage at Madison Square Garden by shipping everything you will let us take to Madison Square Garden. So they basically came 2 days before that show with some movers, and they took everything basically but the instruments. All the random knickknacks, all the lamps, all the desks, tables, my couches, my chairs, coffee table, rugs, all the taps, like everything. They took everything. And my only one thing was like, I don't want to be paid or anything. I just want a free ticket to the show, and I want you to put it back the way you found it. And it was hilarious. So, I mean, if you look at the videos at Madison Square Garden, you will see these are not lookalikes. These are like the actual items from this room. And they did an amazing job. They got them on stage. They brought them back. And I went to New York to see the show, obviously. I got back after the movers had taken everything back, and I came back down here the first day to work again. It was like, holy shit. They not only put everything back, they even put some of the things back in the way that I'd been meaning to correct.
Yeah.
You know, like they nailed all the mistakes. They did it perfectly. So now all this stuff has made a journey to Madison Square Garden and back, which is a hilarious little addition to every little item in here.
I was at the show. I actually was standing next to the stage during most of the show. And
I was there too.
And so we were probably within feet of each other, maybe.
We must have been, yeah. I was like, right, yeah, stage left, just like in that clump.
And I saw the furniture.
You saw the furniture?
Yeah.
Yep. I'll never forget, like, I think Charles Jones was actually in my chair, this little chair here, like literally texting on stage. I remember him being on his phone on that chair, just chilling. It's like, oh my God.
What was that experience for you? Because in part, you know, I think an aspect of your narrative is that you, while a lot of your kind of peer group moved through Michigan, even came out of Michigan and then left, you stayed. So it's kind of, it's interesting that even though you stayed there, somehow the furniture ends up on stage in New York anyway.
Yeah, I know.
But what was it like for you, and what, you know, does that represent anything to you? Like, I think that you're really kind of proudly digging into staying in Michigan.
Yeah. It would seem like that because of how many of the people I work with don't live here and how few musicians make this choice. You could think that I'm this person who's really like making a statement. I'm not, actually. It's kind of been one of those things where I've just been, I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but I've been kind of trying to sort of play tennis with the universe almost and just see what's being lobbed back, and it's like it's just been lobbing these Ann Arbors back at me, and it sounds pretty woo-woo to say the universe, but just kind of like, being open to where the energy seems to be flowing. And so there's never been a moment where I would have had an obvious time to just like logistically move camp, because I've always just been involved in so many projects all going at the same time. So there's never been like a professional break. Like as soon as I graduated college, I was on the road with my band that I was managing and booking, and it just went up from there, And if anybody's managed and booked a band, they know how intense that is while doing all the touring. It's ridiculous. And so literally from that point forward, from whatever I was, 22, like I've never had a professional break. I've never taken a break, maybe you could say, but I never had a natural one just fall in my lap that was like, well, you have nothing to do now. What do you want to do? I think if that had happened, I probably would have been like, shit, I got to go to LA or I got to go to New York. I'm going to do something, But it's just been like, blah, blah, blah. I've just been kind of like, it's been a deluge almost of like just stuff. And so at a certain point, I just was like, I just need a studio to be able to keep up with the things I'm trying to do and being asked to do. And then at that point, when you're looking at buying real estate to build a recording studio, good luck doing that in New York or LA. Like, I wish you well, but if you don't have a few $1 million lying around, which I didn't, and then it was like, well, I guess I could build it anywhere, but I was already here, and I found this amazing house, this great deal, and it had 1,000 square feet of like studio space. Like, it was just there. It was there. Okay. And then it was like, well, I'll do that for now. And if I ever need to move to LA, I can still do that. And that's still the case, but I just still haven't had a break. I haven't had that break hasn't come. And now I got this studio that I've invested so much time and money and stuff into, and it's this amazing resource. To recreate this anywhere else would be, I have an upright, I have a grand piano, I have a Hammond V3 and with a Leslie, I have an 88 key Mark II Rhodes. It's like teacher's model Worley. I have 2 drum sets. It's like, I got so much stuff down here, and the space is beautifully tuned and it sounds amazing. And, now I would be like, I feel like if I moved into like a 200 square foot little cubby, in one of these big cities for the same amount of money, I would be kind of taking a professional step back in a way. It's a funny thing to say. I'd get more opportunities. I know I'd get more opportunities out there, but I wouldn't have, I guess, it's at the end of the day, you say, what do I want to do out here? What's important to me? And what's important to me is not working with the most famous people. It's making the best music for the best reasons that I can. And so if that's what I want to do, I haven't seen a reason to go to the place where I'd work with more famous people. So I don't know. Here I am. It's not a statement. It's more of just been like, the way I feel about it is like, wow, I'm still here. How'd that happen? I don't know. But hey, I got this house and this studio and I'm here. And
I hear something in the music that you're making also that is very patient and carefully thought about. Like there's a lot of space, and you're not afraid to take time to develop ideas in the pop production space, which is not so common. And there's something very kind of exquisite about it all. And I sometimes I wonder when people are not. This is just a name that like popped in my head as I'm thinking about this, but like Bon Iver is another example of a camp that was sort of created in the upper Midwestern woods, in which there's time and emotional space available to just kind of develop stuff.
Yeah, you know what? That's so cool that you say that, and you're making me realize it's not only. It's actually, Justin Vernon is a huge inspiration for me. I love his music. And it's funny, even when I don't love his music, I love his music because I love where he's coming from, and I'm like, love that he's always taking chances.
Come on, skinny love, just let's sing it. To pour a little soul we will never hear. My, staring at the sink of blood across the knee.
You're making me realize, like, I do actually really like the way music sounds when it's made in that kind of headspace of a patient, kind of open, really sincere, generous place. That's the music I really like to listen to, and that's the music I really hope to make. And it Doesn't mean it's all slow or it's all like vibey, spacey, ambient, reverbed out, but it's like there's something about that quality. And maybe where you live can, I mean, there's definitely there's a composer who I love named John Luther Adams who like all of his music is like inspired by Alaska. He lives in Alaska. And so all of his music has these huge, just like vast, like ethereal soundscapes. So, I mean, yeah, man, I don't know how much I wonder how much Ann Arbor influences what I make.
I also wonder if there's something valuable for your friends and the people that work with you who have left to kind of be able to come back and reset with you. Like maybe they leave and they go to the coast and they like gather up all their angst and their, material and their whatever it is, but then to be able to come back into this kind of like very centered space and also kind of unchanging in a sense. Like the fact that you're still there maybe represents a kind of a rootedness for the people you work with.
It's funny. Your questions are actually making me see things clearer. So thank you. You're right. And actually one of the reasons why, like what I was saying about like, there's never been a natural time is like, it just consistently has been this thing where we've been like, well, if someone wants to make a record, we're going to make a record. Where do you want to do it? And they want to come and hear it.
Yeah.
They want to come. If it kept being like, I'm going to go to LA to make this record. I have to go to LA to make this record. I probably would have just moved to LA after 5 records or whatever, But everybody's wanted to come here because it's cheaper. There's more space. It's like you can get away. And because I'm the one who's making as the quote unquote producer, if each artist keeps making that decision, I'm never leaving Michigan. They come here for a few months, but I just never get a chance to leave. So you're right. It's actually been a convenient thing for other artists to be able to come here and have the combination of the space and the ability to get away from a lot of the logistical intensity, that big cities often add to projects, especially when there's money for time kind of components. So yeah, I think it's a good question and actually kind of an insight.
You started out by talking about, what did you say, playing tennis with the universe? Is that how you said it?
Yeah, I've never said that before. That's not like a phrase I say, but yeah.
Well, I like it, and although you sort of said, well, that's woo-woo or whatever, I just doing a little preliminary look into kind of how you got started, I can see how you might find yourself being a person who says something like, I'm playing tennis with the universe. And I want you to tell me the story. What I do know is that you, by the time you were like 13 years old, were obsessed with Irish music.
Yeah.
And that led you on a journey that is still very much present in your both personal and professional life today. And that's a pretty woo-woo story, to be honest with you. I mean, it seems pretty intense way to get started as a musician. Can you tell me how you discovered Irish music, what that meant to you? Like, what happened there?
I know. It's such an interesting, it's weird for me too, to be honest. It's confusing for me, all of it, to this day. Maybe it's more confusing than it's ever been. But yeah, as a kid, I got really obsessed with bagpipes. I saw them in a Scrooge McDuck cartoon when I was probably 7 years old or 6 years old and just was like, what is that? I want to know more about that thing. And I bugged my parents for so many years that by the time I was 9, they were like, shit, he's serious about this. Let's see if we can find the bagpipe teacher to tell us what the hell we would do about this. So then I started taking bagpipe lessons, Scottish bagpipe lessons when I was 9. I was still kind of your typical kid. I was like, I really wanted to just go play capture the flag and baseball at the park with my friends. And my parents had to be like, you got to practice your 15 minutes. We're doing these bagpipe lessons. I kind of liked it, but I didn't actually love it. And then I discovered the Irish bagpipes, and that's how I discovered Irish music, was through actually my aunt gave us a, what do you call it? It's not burned. It's like just ripped. I guess it's a ripped VHS of Riverdance when that first came out. It would have been like 97 maybe.
I like that you are of a generation, I'm just old enough that you can't actually find the word for a copied, a dubbed VHS. I guess that's what it is. I think it's dubbed. Yeah, I think it was dubbed. Okay. It's not ripped. It's not burned. What do you do with tape?
What do you do with it? Yeah. So this dubbed VHS from my aunt, and so she was like, "You guys got to see this," and we checked it out. And then there's this solo, this Irish bagpipe, which is called the Uilleann Pipes. This solo in the middle of Riverdance, and it's beautiful, and it's still beautiful. When I've heard it to this day, I still think it's beautiful. It's this beautiful piece, and it's really well played, and it's very moving. And I heard that, and that sound really captured me. That's when I really became sort of music obsessed, was like the Irish bagpipes. That led me into my music obsession, which now has not ended since that day. But that was the tipping point. And then I got really into Irish bagpipes, and there was a teacher in Detroit, which is about 45 minutes from here, and my parents were supportive and kind enough to drive me there for lessons. And this is when the internet we didn't have the internet in my house. I had to go research this at the library. That was where the internet was, and pay 10 cents a sheet for copying out all this information. And it was a wild little world trying to learn about Irish bagpipes in 1997 or 98. Anyway, and that just led me into Irish music. And yeah, I was, like you said, I was obsessed with it. I was quickly like performing with like a kid group, doing gigs and festivals and then competitions. And it just became my whole world there for a while.
And playing bagpipe still? That was your instrument?
Yes, Irish bagpipes, yeah. And then that grew out into some of the other Irish instruments. There's an instrument called, I played some Irish flute. I played these Irish whistles. I started to play some Irish guitar. I started playing the Irish drum called the bowron. Not spelled the way it sounds.
It looks like bod drum. Does it look like
bod haran? It looks like bod haran.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was my whole world. And I stopped competing probably when I was like 16, I guess. And then when I was 16, 17, I started getting interested. My ears sort of opened up to the whole world of music. And then it was like, oh, wow, there's Irish music, but oh my God, there's a lot of other wild music out there. And then that was when I started exploring other things. And I kind of left Irish music almost entirely for a long time after that.
Before you give it up, 2 questions remain. One, are you of Irish descent? Do you have Irish family?
It does not seem that I am. It does not look like I am. Apparently, Duncan is originally an Irish name, O'Dinkin, which became O'Duncan and then Duncan. And there are still Dinkins and O'Dinkins in Ireland. I've met some of them. And then I was like, oh shit, maybe I am actually Irish, because I always thought I was Scottish. But I just did this, I don't know how thorough it is, some ancestry test. And it didn't say anything about Ireland in there. So if I am Irish, it's really far back. Really, really, really far back. So Scottish for sure, but
I fell in love with Spain in high school. I started going to Spain around the same age that you went to Ireland. When I got my 23andMe, I was like just waiting for some Spanish. I'm Jewish. I wanted to be Sephardic. I thought, just give me a little Spanish. Explain this for me, and it's not there.
Yeah, same thing, man. It's funny. I know. I was hoping the same way, and I feel. In so many ways, I feel Irish at heart, that's why, and I go to Ireland usually pretty frequently, except for COVID, but like these days I go pretty frequently, and it's just like, man, I feel this connection to that place. It's just so deep. I don't know why. There's no logical explanation for it.
So you went as a 13 or 14-year. How old were you the first time you went to Ireland?
I was 13, and I actually lived there for a year with my family.
Was that because you wanted to immerse yourself in it? You convinced them to move to Ireland?
It was actually really just lucky timing. I got really lucky in a lot of ways with this music stuff, and it's kind of just jaw-dropping to me.
Yeah.
One of them is the fact that my dad was a English professor at a university, and he was up for sabbatical. And before any of this Irish music stuff had come up, it'd been, like a few years of my parents, I would hear them talking like, maybe we should go here for sabbatical, maybe we should go there, And so it just so happened that I'm taking lessons with this Irish bagpipe teacher, and these were very intense lessons, like 4-hour lessons each one every week. He at a certain point told my parents, Tyler needs to move on. I've kind of taught him everything I can teach him. He needs to go to Ireland to learn more. And it was just at this perfect time where we was like, wow, in 6 months we need to decide where we're going to go. My dad is a writer, English teacher, so he loves Irish literature and the Irish playwriting tradition. And he was like, I'll do an Irish-based like literary project, and then Tyler can do the Irish music thing. So it was just totally this lucky, amazing timing. And the teacher had a friend who had an empty apartment in Dublin that we could rent. So it was just like, boom, there you go.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I do. I have 5 siblings.
You have 5 siblings.
5 siblings, yeah.
And did you all go to Ireland?
All much older. So they were all out of the house. Like by 15 years, they're all much older than me. So I was this kind of, late to the game situation for my parents.
Yeah, but so it's sort of like being an only child, but also with these older siblings.
It's exactly what I am. Yeah, yeah.
At a certain point, late teens, you kind of start to explore other music. You went to Michigan for college?
Went to Michigan for college. That's the whole reason for the whole Vulfpeck season. It's the U of M. And Theo and Joey Dosick and just so many of those kind of, if you look at that Vulf adjacent crew, just all of us, the U of M was the hub.
And you went as a musician.
Yeah, yeah.
What was your instrument?
That's also a very good question. My instrument the first year, so the year before I auditioned at the U of M, I got really excited about jazz. It really suddenly I got it. I was like, oh my God, this music is wow. Just once I could hear it. At first the dissonance was too much for me. And then I got over it and then I was like, holy shit.
This is coming from a former bagpipe player. The dissonance in jazz was too much for you.
Yeah, man. Well, it's just all those chromatic notes. I couldn't hear it. It just was like, maybe someone played me the wrong jazz, but I just was always just like, whoa, too much dissonance. And then I flipped and then I got it. Honestly, partly because I was playing with this amazing musician in a band. We had a band together, this fiddle player named Jeremy Kittle, who's someone I still work with today, who's really one of my favorite musicians just in the world ever. I'm obsessed with his music.
He lives down the street.
Amazing. Of course he does. Jeremy is just phenomenal. And so we were playing together and he started getting into jazz. And then it was kind of his journey into jazz that I was like, I could finally start to hear it. And then it was blew my mind. And I got obsessed and I thought, I want to try to do jazz on one of the Irish instruments I play is called the low whistle. And it's basically an octave lower than a normal penny whistle. And that's what it is. It's an octave penny whistle. And I thought, if I could get one of these things to be chromatic, I could try to figure out jazz on this thing. Because I didn't really want to learn to play the sax or something else. So I spent all these months working with a maker to sort of design a chromatic version of this and got some sort of prototype going. And so I auditioned for the U of M on that thing. And so that was my instrument at the U of M officially, was low whistle. I've not actually researched this, but I can say it with some degree of confidence. I think I might be the only low whistle BFA jazz major in a university program so far.
I think it's pretty safe. I think it's a pretty safe assumption.
It feels safe, and it also feels like I really hope I'm wrong. It'd be so cool if I found out it was some other weirdo who tried that.
How did you interact with the faculty, with the what was expected of you,
Yeah.
with the curriculum?
Yeah, they were really, I mean, U of M kind of prides itself on being a really open jazz program, and they were just like, okay, we'll just kind of treat you like, basically like a sax player, an alto player, and kind of similar range, and we'll just make it work, and I'll be in just playing if there's flute parts or sax parts in the different arrangements, I'll play those, and otherwise do everything as normal and just take lessons with a sax teacher, and I just have to make up my own technique stuff, but then get the music lessons. And so that's what we did for the first year. But then ironically, I caved in to certain pressures in myself and decided to switch to saxophone. So I did saxophone the last 3 years of school. And
Alto?
Tenor.
When you were reading the saxophone or flute, particularly saxophone parts, as a low whistle player, were you reading them in B flat or E flat? Would you read an alto part?
I would read it in E flat, because actually if I played the whistle, an E flat whistle, then I could just not have to transpose.
Got it.
Yeah, thankfully. Now I'm also a horrible, abysmal sight reader. I'm so bad that it became it was funny to the faculty. It was just funny how bad I was. Every time there was a sight reading sort of component of an audition, we would all just sort of laugh and be like, all right, here we go. It's just going to be a total train wreck every time. I'm terrible at it. So I always had to take the sheet music home and just learn it, and then bring it back to the rehearsals, kind of memorized. So yeah, I would play the alto parts or the flute parts. And it was cool. It was actually really cool. And there was a lot of potential in it. But I just got really tired of not hearing myself. I could never hear myself after a year of just doing all these rehearsals and performances. And it was just every time it was Tyler's turn to play, it was just kind of silent, and the drummer would have to play at 5% volume. And it was just such a buzzkill every time. I just was I I can't take it anymore. I can't be the buzzkill instrument anymore. So I bailed and went on the normal saxophone thing. It was cool, and I think still feel like there's potential in it. It's something I don't want to like give up on, even though it's been all these years. It's something I hope to pick up again.
But so it sounds like your relationship with the saxophone was kind of begrudging. It was kind of like, okay, I'll do this to be able to stay in the program and be able to be heard a little more.
It wasn't quite begrudging because I was excited about the saxophone. I wasn't excited to learn a new instrument, but I was excited about what it would like just to have an instrument finally that would just like project, that I had control over in that way. You know, it was both. I was like not begrudging the saxophone. I was kind of begrudging that I felt like I'd sort of failed. I felt like I had a cool project and I was excited about it. And then I was like, sort of felt like I had put in too much time into this instrument that I had ultimately said, like, I'm not sure this works. That was the kind of begrudgment, you know, and then the saxophone was the solution. So I was excited about the solution, but yeah, that's that kind of two-part emotion to it.
And did you get interested in recording at school? Had you recorded already? Where did that piece of it fit into your development?
It's funny. I used to think that it started later, but now when I look back, I'm like, you know what? That was actually always a thing for me, and I never named it because it never occurred to me as something that you could really get into. But even as like a kid, I remember I got a 4-track tape recorder, and I played on that thing all the time. I was making all the tapes all the time on that thing. So I mean, I think I got that when I was 15, and that was when I got a wah pedal. I was trying to play wah pipes into my 4-track, and I had this multi-effects pedal, and I was just making all sorts of weird experimental whatever nonsense on that thing. But if I look back, it's like, man, I would get lost in that world. It would actually be one of these things where I would actually sort of be like, bad Tyler, like you should be practicing, not wasting your time in these recordings, you know? It's so funny. I was like being that parent to myself, but I loved it so much I would just get lost for hours in it and then come back and be like, shit, it happened again. I'm supposed to be practicing the things. Damn it, you know?
It's funny. I got a 4-track too when I was 13 years old, and hearing you talk about it, it makes me think about how beautiful it is to start on something as simple as a 4-track because you learn so many principles, and it's just limited enough that you have to solve problems creatively.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not necessarily the case right now. Like if we were 13 today, we'd probably start on GarageBand or something, in which case like the whole setup would be a little bit different. But I also used to get lost for hours and hours. I mean, I would go to my 4-track like on a Saturday morning if I didn't have, a day that I didn't have school. I'd like wake up and just like in my pajamas just go to it. And then like at the end of the day, I just hadn't gotten dressed. I hadn't brushed my teeth. I probably forgot to eat. I just was like just in it, And I love hearing you say that. Looking back on it, actually, that is practice. That is a form of practice.
Exactly. That's like, it's so funny to look back and be like, oh, Tyler, like that was like you discovering a big part of yourself, but you didn't see it at the time. It was like playing was everything. It had to be all about playing and playing really well. And then it was like sort of blossoming interest and creative spirit was like, just couldn't be contained. I just couldn't help it, almost it's like the magnetism to it. And it wasn't, I guess everybody's got these like nuanced different like ways, it's like the exciting thing for me wasn't actually the like engineering component. It was just the ability to like paint with sound. I was just loving painting and having a canvas where the sound stuck, it's like you throw it on there and it stays, then you can add something else to it. Holy shit. Just what a cool thing. And so, yeah. And then I remember actually I had like this cracked copy of Fruity Loops. And I would also get lost for hours just making beats in Fruity Loops for no reason but for fun, and then be like, damn it, well, I've lost hours again on Fruity Loops. I should be practicing. Same kind of relationship to it. So, but then it only actually became a thing in my sort of frontal cortex where I realized like, oh, this is something I want to get better at. I started listening to pop music or pop-inspired music kind of in the second half of my freshman year. I like kind of discovered all this sort of cool, like I remember the band The Faint. Some of these groups that were doing there was a combination of performance and electronics. I think that was like the bridge for me. And then that led me into just like straight up like Michael Jackson. And then I was like, whoa, like, hold the phone. Michael Jackson, wait, what? And then how do they make those sounds? How do they make these things sound like that? And then that led to like kind of Radiohead and Cornelius. just sort of quickly exposed me to this realization, like, oh, humans make that. It's not like a
And before
a
that, you
robot
were
makes
like,
this.
you had been like, it's a lot of Irish music, and then it's like jazz. Those are your references.
That's it. Yeah, that was it. It was Irish music and jazz, and then it was like the world of sort of cool, composed, electronic inspired, like whatever stuff that's like, we have so much of that. We don't have words for them really. But I think that's what it was suddenly realizing like sound, how malleable sound was. Just starting to be like, wow, they just made a sound. Like I've never heard that sound. Like a sound that I've never heard. Just sort of really sank in. It's like people are making sounds, literally. How do you do that? And then that led me into sort of an obsession with that kind of stuff, production and synthesis and sampling and just album production stuff.
Okay, so you become aware that people are making sounds, that this is something that can be done. This is a job. This is a role that somebody's going to play. And at the same time, you discover Michael Jackson, and it seems like the music that you put together, the projects that you put together in college were kind of dance-oriented pop projects, right? Like My Dear Disco, was that your band?
Yeah, I mean, it was my band in that I started it and kind of was like a sort of, I was trying to, I mean, it evolved a lot. It was not very well structured hierarchy, so I was basically leading the band, but it was also a democratic band, and then the band evolved, and then I was kind of co-leading it, and then I was genuinely co-leading it, so kind of weird mishmash of stuff. But I started that band, and directly out of this desire to be like, I really wanted to explore kind of these pop sounds. It wasn't about making pop songs as much as it was like pop sounds. And then I got excited about, like, dance music became really appealing to me because I was just like, I don't know, I think I liked the, maybe this is where the Irish music thing comes in, like the sort of just like the pulse, everybody having this pulse together and experiencing it in a visceral way. Yeah, and then when it was like, well, if you're going to do that, maybe it'd be cool to have some songs. And then I was like, well, I can't just keep playing sax and pipes. If there's a singer, I need another instrument. And that's when I was like, well, maybe it's time for me to like figure out these synthesizer things for real. And I got my first synth. And then that really kind of took over. And that actually took over basically entirely. Not playing synth, but becoming like sounds, keys guy, like album making guy, where it was much less about playing, like no sax, no pipes.
When I listen to your recent productions, I mean, certainly the project with Antwaun, but Theo's last record, the most recent Olam stuff, the stuff that I hear you putting out is like, it has a lot of the values of electronic music in that you really are not afraid to process and filter and sample, but often using organic elements, like taking a lot of the values of electronic music, but applying it to really acoustic, warm, woody sounds, Mm-hmm. But then there's this phase that precedes that, which is the sort of like My Dear Disco. I don't know how you pronounced she, the
S/he.
S/he.
Yeah.
That project also, which was like, no, we're making electronic music. Like that's what's happening.
Totally.
Hold you in my arms at night in the dark, and I wonder if you had to leave, could I let you go? I wonder. The images shake me right down to the bone like thunder. And if you couldn't see me, would I walk away and just go?
And then it seems like at some point you found a way to, eventually marry these two impulses and that's what I feel is happening with you right now.
Wow, man. I'm gonna have to hire you sometime to like coach me and be like, what's going, like, what am I doing right now? Like, help me understand. I think you're right, but I've never thought about it so clearly Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I guess we're always discovering what kind of music we're making right now. I guess what we're making right now is always changing. So I think electronic music probably will always have sort of an influence on me. Maybe it's just because I don't know why that is. I think pop and electronic will always influence me, even if I'm making stuff that would not sound at all like pop or electronic music. Like, I love the thing about pop that I love, and it's just also the thing I love about a lot of my favorite classical music too, is just strong themes and great variations. Theme and variation, like just how strong a theme can be means how good the variations can feel, and just like those values I really love, and I'm always trying to bring them to anything I do. And I just hear them really strongly represented in really good pop, because pop it can't be anything but really good, memorable themes. And my favorite classical music, even if it's a theme that's like, the piece like Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima, like a really intense orchestral piece, but it's very thematic. It's just texturally thematic. It's not tonal. Yeah, I think what happened is I really dug deep into like synths and, electronic sources for sounds, which I still use when they are called for. But I actually started becoming really just fascinated with like the natural world and just how rich the world sounds, and just kind of craving that richness in every sound. I guess I've been craving that dimension and everything, and just so that has led me to intuitively just start making sounds instead of making them from an oscillator or a drum machine, specifically like making them from just natural things that I record with my Zoom or with my microphone, or samples of like trees or wind or whatever. I'm always just, that has become a really inspiring infinite, truly when you open yourself up to like any sound can become anything, and you can get that sound from any recording of anything in the world. That's a lifetime, and many more lifetimes. And it's just got this, I started doing that a little bit here and there, and I guess you would call it found sound stuff.
Yeah.
And it just kind of took over because I just realized, I'd spend all this time making these synth sounds, and I'd spend so much time like layering and all these modulations and intermodulations and modulation automations to kind of get this richness. And then I would start making the sound, instead of making a pad, let's say, from a synth, I make it from hitting a pot, and then taking off the attack and reversing it. And then it was like, wow, that already just has a lot going on. I don't actually need to do all this like synth knob tweaking to get to the sound the feeling I was hoping for. And so now you're right. I rarely actually will use just an actual straight synth, unless I'm like really looking for a specific like synth specific color that's like, this is a synth by God, and that's the whole point of the sound. I'm really like making sounds out of other things, and you're right, I really do love super warm kind of wood earthy type tones, and I like doing non-earthy things to them.
As you describe this thing about theme and where classical and pop music kind of overlap, I mean, I think it's really true. Culturally, there seems to be, for example, often the classical music section in the record store would be right next to the jazz section,
Totally.
But in fact, pop music in a way shares more with, and pop record making even shares as much with classical music in how deliberate and intentional everything is. And it's less about sort of throwing it away in the moment and much more about crafting and capturing.
Completely crafted. You're so right. It's like utterly crafted. And classical music was the pop music at the time, So you're totally right. It's obviously now like, as classical music, and I'm certainly not an expert in classical music from what I know, though, it's like as it evolves, similar to jazz, it got more and more esoteric generally. Yeah. So maybe at a certain point, it certainly wasn't really pop music anymore. But, that's what the big composers were getting paid for, was to make hits.
I watched this video where you broke down some of the sounds that you used on the Antwaun record.
Yeah.
Book pages turning and, all of these found sounds. And I was really surprised because, honestly, when I heard the project, and I actually talked to Antwaun recently also.
Oh, cool.
And we talked about how it was for him. I mean, first of all, I realized that as much as that's an Antwaun statement, that's a Tyler Duncan statement. There's a lot of you. And in the promotion of it, it's kind of Antwaun's record, but it's kind of your record together also, and it's a collaborative project. But I was really amazed at how organic the sound sources were on a lot of this stuff, because it felt like it was deliberately meant to compete in the dance music space and sort of thumb its nose in some way at like a lot of more generic sounding pop music. Like it was going to make you feel the same way, it was going to make you dance, it was going to make you, it's going to sound present and punchy and, dancey, but then, it's also kind of, I don't know, a little askew in some way. But watching how you got those sounds, I was really shocked at how many sounds came from sort of non-expected sources.
Now it's been some time since I felt right with you. Now we're on the line and our hearts are trying to get through. But we live on different pages, spelling out frustration. Try to understand, but speak a different language. When the love we give is more than what we're taking in, we're lost in translation.
There's almost no synths on this record. There's a couple, there's two synth moments, and they're not things that actually play any real. There's like a little couple flourishes, and I think it's actually on one. There's only a couple synth parts on Lost in Translation. There's no other synths on the record. So it's all found sound. Anything that's not an obvious, that's a guitar, thing is a found sound thing. Mm-hmm. I wasn't doing that because I wanted to thumb my nose, at the...
Or prove anything or whatever.
Or prove anything. No, I know. This EP was an art project, which is funny to say because it's so poppy, but, it's pop in the sense of, I thought, / we thought, it'd be cool to make some pop. Not because we needed to or people were asking us to. We didn't have a label deal. It was there was no infrastructure putting a pressure on us to make pop music. It was purely out of just would be fun to do that with Antwaun particularly. It was I really feel like I was really curious to hear a pop sort of mentality with Antwaun's voice. It's we have a lot of Antwaun doing soul and funk and all those kinds of things, and he's the best at it. And he hopefully will do a lot more, and I know he will because we're working on his solo record right now, which will not sound like Ascension. But it was man, what would it be like to kind of have some dance music, pop song writing, Antwaun's voice, and to not use synths? I'd be curious to hear that. And so that's what it was. That's what I wanted to do. But the funny thing is your previous question is making me realize I'm probably going to be thinking that with everything, or I'm going to be oh, it'd be cool to do this and do that and do that, but only found sound. Oh, it'd be cool to do this and that, but only found sound. It's Tyler, you keep doing the same thing. Actually, is what you're doing. So yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's just fun for me. It's fun to think about these songs thematically and Lost in Translation, to think okay, so there's these functions that we, if you make dance music or pop or electronic music, you become familiar with these certain functions of sounds and why they work. Why does a cymbal work? The cymbal is just high frequency with a certain shape, dynamic shape. A lot of things have high frequencies. Just if you have the same shape with high frequencies, it'll feel like what a cymbal does, but it'll just be a different sound. It's take that to every sort of sound, and then it's okay, cool. Now how can you paint with that? With what is the meaning of the song? What is the meaning of the sound? And can you pair those together? What's that feel like? If instead of being a reverse symbol, it's me shuffling book pages, and the song's called Lost in Translation, and it's all these sort of lyrical sort of double meanings that have to do with being in a relationship, but also sort of being in a library. That's a fun sort of door to open as a creative, someone who's making something. And so that's how I ended up there. But it wasn't to sort of prove anything. I certainly don't think I have anything to prove, because the best fucking dance music's a lot of it's been made, and you know what I mean? Geez, I'm not trying to win. I'm not trying to battle that stuff. It's incredible. And it's more of just a fun, maybe contribution, just to be well, here's a fun way that we kind of came up with ways to do things and ways to dress a song. You know what I mean? Here's one way to dress a song, and here's another way. And so it was fun to sort of be okay, it's going to be dancey, it's going to be catchy, it's not going to shy away from that. We're not going to be timid about this being a pop thing. And also because no one is asking us to do this, now it's like, cool, we can also, it gave me the chance to like just do my little like nerdy art thing with it, and see if I could get away with both at the same time, perhaps,
I think actually, I'm gonna actually express an opinion about something that is probably out of line. It's on some level, but
I love it.
But I do think I have absolutely no right to say this. I do think that for you to make an art project with Antwaun is different than for Antwaun to make an art project with you at this stage in his career. And I'm so glad that you're making a record now, because when I heard that statement, I've been sort of waiting for the Antwaun record, right?
Haven't we all?
And in talking to him, I really understood that he has been burdened with that level of expectation since he was a kid. And as you were off exploring
Totally.
Bagpipes in Ireland, I mean, he was like signed to a contemporary gospel label, and everybody wanted him to be a different thing. And he's walking into every room with people projecting all of their fantasies about what he's going to be onto him. And
Yep.
when this record came out, I was like, I wonder if this is ultimately helpful in clarifying who this guy is as an artist. And I loved it as a record, but I was confused putting my little record business hat on going, what does this do for Antwaun's career? And then in speaking to him, I know that he's making another record, and it sounds like that's closer to the record that's sort of like the artistic statement of who he is.
100%.
It just made me think, because he said something interesting. He's like, I think of my whole career as one big experiment, which is sort of like you saying I'm playing tennis with the universe.
Yeah.
But I also got the sense like when you're the front guy, when you're that screen that gets everybody's kind of fantasies put on, each one of those little experiments is, I don't want to say it's riskier, but it's like maybe it represents something a little different.
Yeah. I mean, it was intentional, and we are when we're aware of all these things, and it just felt like the most honest way to release it.
Yeah.
Whether or not it made sense professionally, sort of felt like, how are we ever going to know that? And maybe there are better reasons to do things than that. And I'm sure it was influenced by the fact that like we had already started, we have been working on his record for 6 months, more than 6 months. And so it was like, we know his solo record is coming. And it was like, okay, we have this EP, and like, you know what? It's not an Antwaun record. Antwaun's record's not going to sound like that. It was a duo record. It sounded like the way it sounds because of being what it was, which was us and me being not a producer, whereas a producer, my job is to be like, I am a surrogate parent for your vision. Tell me what we're doing, and I'm going to do everything I can to make that the best version of it can be. I am trying not to make my music on your music. That EP was very much me just being like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I'm not even asking anybody. I'm just doing it, kind of vibe. So certainly wasn't Antwaun's record. And but I think actually where I kind of landed on it was like, I think it did make professionally the most sense, because I think I was hoping it would put a little bit of a release valve on Antwaun a little bit and be like, you know what? You just released something. Your name's on it. And there you go. And people are going to listen to it, and they're going to make assumptions, and they're going to make conclusions, and then you're going to make another record, and then they're going to change all those assumptions and conclusions, and you'll make another one, and everybody's going to get you wrong. You know what I mean? That's the thing you have to kind of realize as an artist, is like, no one is going to get what you're doing except you, ultimately. Maybe some people get it more, some people get it less. Maybe some people get this wave. Some people like acoustic Dylan. They don't like electric Dylan. Some people don't like acoustic. It's just like, it's always changing. You can't mold yourself to a moving target. So you just let people make their decisions, and you make stuff, and you hope that, as long as you're making stuff for the right reasons and doing the best you can, it'll be of value to somebody at some point. And so it just sort of felt like that mentality of like, you know what, this is a duo EP. It's just an EP, and we could wait to release it after your solo record, but like, why? Because you could make an argument like, well, you release a solo album, then you're starting to define a sound, and then you come out with this very different sound, and now people are confused. It's like, to not be confusing would be boring, I would almost say. It's good to be a little confusing.
I love it. And I also really appreciate the distinction between projects in which you are the surrogate parent for the artist's vision and when it's your project or a collaborative thing, because that is a big question. Where are the guides around what you're doing and how you feel that, intuit that, how you find the limits of what you're doing or what your role is on a given project? Like when you're working with artists in which you haven't written the songs, how is that a different process for you? Is it different than if you have written the songs?
What the main difference is really just, is this their record or is this our record? Is this my record? That's really what it kind of comes down to, because if it's their record, I am occupying the same sort of, I don't have a better analogy than surrogate.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a mess. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but it makes the most sense to me right now, which is just like, I am literally, and I'm very intentionally sort of trying to collect myself, do like a meditation, and like sort of try to be a mirror / creative fuel provider and sort of transmitter on behalf of what I perceive their vision to be. And so that shows up kind of the same, because I'm coming from the same feeling. I'm being like, what does this mean to you? Where did this come from? What do you want it to feel like? How does it feel to you now? Like, I'm trying to get all this data, this emotional, creative data. And once I have enough, I like sort of just fill myself with that. And then I create from that place as if it was me. But I'm not me. It's like acting. It's like creative acting. I'm sort of just like method acting I'm trying to be them as a creative method actor. Maybe that's a better analogy. Anyway, that's like when it's someone else's record, that's what I'm trying to do. Because at the end of the day, if we make something that I think is awesome and they don't really feel connected to, we've kind of done nothing. Like, awesome. Well, you have a song that you're not going to be able to release because it's not yours, and they're not going to release it because they don't like it. It's like, okay, so who cares? So it's better to just like fully kind of give myself to that. And so as a songwriter, I'm doing that. As a producer, I'm doing that. As a mixer, like whenever I'm, in that role, I'm trying to do the same thing. And I'm just being I'm sort of just like channeling my whatever creativity I have, and I'm offering it with that. Whereas if it's my record or a collaborative record, I'm not trying to do that at all anymore. I'm thinking about, what do I want and what do we want? And then sort of let's see what's cool about that combination,
You said at the beginning of the conversation that you have, often multiple projects going at the same time.
Yeah.
Is it confusing to shift between all the different method acting projects, like to know how you feel about one record when the values of that album are so different from the other one that you might be making at the same time?
You know what? It actually kind of makes it easier for me, funny enough, I think, because I think one of the key components, ultimately of creativity in general is actually sort of non-attachment, You really, like, attachment and creativity are nemeses, which you kind of realize, I think, through experience, the more you make stuff and the more you realize, like, wow, the more I'm attached to whether it's an idea or an identity or a thing I've made or a thing I hope it wanted to be, or attached to an idea of what I'm supposed to be, any of that stuff is like a direct threat to it. And so by sort of just having to sort of shift out of one mode to another, it just sort of forces me to like be malleable and just not to take it all so seriously, just to kind of be like, okay, cool. Today we're doing like a song about a transformative psychedelic moment. And then tomorrow I'm like making a song that's about someone's that dead lot, like someone who they lost that they love, who died, and it's a grief song, and I'm inhabiting that space, and then I'm going to another one. And it's like, it kind of actually helps me to, I think, get further into the space, because I don't have to feel scared about whether or not this is going to be me forever. You know what I'm saying? It kind of is like, cool, I can fully be this today because there's not an internal feeling about it. And so I can kind of go there more, I think, a little bit as a result.
All right, from the abstract to the concrete, another thought that occurred to me as you were describing this was how much emotional information is conveyed in reverb and delay.
Oh, great question. That's a great question. And I love that we're going to get a little nerdy here, but I actually think of every single element of music in an emotional context. Because I think it's all sound, and that's what we're making. Is sound. Sound is music. Music is sound. So if it's sound and it changes the sound, it's changing the emotion in some way. And that's how I think about all of it, is like, what's the feeling difference about this versus that? So delay, reverb, super emotional tools if you want them to be. and certainly changed the emotion quite a bit. I mean, it's pretty different to hear someone tell you something really intense about the way they feel if there's no reverb and it just sounds like they're literally like an inch away from your face than if they say it and it sounds like they're 30 feet away in a parking lot or something. So it's a very different emotion, and it's a great, that's what I love to play with. I love to play with how sound and emotions interrelate in these intuitive ways, and how colorful and how much you can play. It's like an immense place to experiment, and it's great to do things that pair. And it's also very fun to do things that are juxtapositions, and like make something kind of the opposite of what it should be. And so, yeah, I mean, reverb is like, I think about like the way a choir in a church, you know what I mean? Like church reverb, very emotional, things that have a cathedral reverb like become pretty emotional pretty quick, like if you heard a Gregorian chant with no reverb, it would be a pretty different vibe, I don't know if it would have been as popular as it became if there wasn't for reverb,
I think that music was designed for the spaces, and the space was designed for the music.
Exactly.
But I also know that you are really into, as you say, juxtaposing things, and I've talked to so many of the Vulf and Vulf adjacent people, and so many of them have said, "Oh, you got to talk to Tyler. You got to talk to Tyler." I remember Joe Dart was like, "You got to talk to Tyler," and you got to ask him about this Irish thing, and he's got this band Olam, and I feel like an asshole for like thinking like, you know what, I'm not going to check out this Irish record right now. Like I'm going to check out some other record instead. Like that sounds cool. That sounds like a little bit outside of what I'm into, but that's cool, and I bet it's really cool.
Sure.
But man, when I started listening to it, it was like, I loved it. As a matter of fact, I think it's some of my favorite stuff that you do.
Wow.
It's so great. Before the piping starts and the tracks are just going, it's like, wait, is this the right, is this the Irish record?
Totally.
And that's where I realized how far you can push expectation around a kind of music, And then putting electric bass on it and putting, the really dry, fat drums on it, and like,
so dry.
I just think it's so beautiful.
I love that sound, man. That was like, I tend to vision board, storyboard ideas kind of conceptually before I really get into doing anything specific. And I try to think about what feels like maybe an intuitively a good place to start. And the Olam was an interesting one because it was like, working with this other piper whistle player who was my teacher when I was in Ireland, this guy named John McSherry. He's a legend in Irish music, and he was my favorite musician as a kid. And so we have this band years later, but John is like 70s. He's like USA 1970s at heart, like all the way, that's him, that's the music he listens to. And it's just like his essence is like kind of, I don't know, I feel like I think of him that way. And so it was like, well, let's do like so we were talking about doing something. Well, what would we do? And it's like, so I started thinking like, it'd be cool to do something that's like super 70s, like dry kick snare hat type George Harrison record vibe, like super 70s drums. Makes me think of a Rhodes. Actually, maybe Rhodes would be kind of cool. And then like, maybe this like kind of like warm, kind of woofy, like electric bass, like Joni Mitchell vibe a little bit. Not Jocko Joni, but so I was like, okay, yeah, it'd be kind of a cool thing to try. Like, and then actually, you know what? Nick Drake, like a Nick Drake 70s, like acoustic dead string guitar. Let's try that, And that's actually, the Olam is the only time I've ever had that sort of like initial idea for a palette. And that ended up being exactly what it is and has never changed. That's all it is. It's that. It's, dead string acoustic guitar, Rhodes, kick snare hat, one cymbal, electric bass, and then the pipes and the whistles. And but it was born out of actually like thinking about John and his history, the kinds of music I know he and I have both been curious about, and then kind of taking it from there, basically. Like, okay, let's paint with these crayons. Like, what happens when you use these colors? And not trying to make it not Irish. It's interesting. It's like just kind of not going to sound Irish if you have those instruments. But there was not an attempt at like trying to make it not sound Irish and Irish at the same time. That was never an idea.
How was it received in Ireland?
You know what's funny? At first, I feel like we kind of got my least favorite response, which is not, if someone hates it, I'm kind of excited.
I
just
totally
think that's
agree.
a good sign.
I agree.
You know, like I want a strong reaction of something, love it, hate
you want
it.
them to feel something. Yeah, exactly.
Feel something, by God. And instead, I feel like we just got a bunch of like, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. Kind of like that. And I was like, oh, man. I knew how I felt about it. I felt like this is cool, and I feel proud of it, and I feel like this is a really, really good representation of a genuine overlap of the musicians that are involved. Like me, Mike Shimon, John McSherry, as like the writers of the music, like this is a really like perfect overlap of what the three of us do. And it's the Venn diagram. It's like exactly the overlap. And I felt so confident in that. Whether it's good or not, I knew that was like what it actually pulled off. And I felt like at the time, I was like, I feel like this is a sound I haven't really heard before. And it wasn't, again, it wasn't like us trying to make a sound we never heard before. It just sort of like landed on it. It was just sort of like, I felt that. Anyways, like I feel like we kind of landed on something accidentally, but it's got a sound, it's got a vibe. And people are not really responding that strongly to it. And so the first tour we did over there, I felt kind of like that. Not many people, almost, no one had heard of us. But what's interesting is that over the years, that record has now kind of become, from what I can tell, sort of like almost like a part of the like tradition. Everybody seems to know about it, and now they have an opinion about it, and now it's a little more intense of an opinion one way or the other. Anyway, it's sort of like the reaction I was hoping for was a very delayed gratification. It didn't happen instantly, and there's a really beautiful sort of relationship I feel like the Olam has with the Irish music community who appreciates what we're doing, and it's just like something I feel really honored to be a part of, which is just to be like I think people think of us now as like one of the contributors to the music, contributors to the tradition and like the living tradition of it. And that to me is like such an honor and something I feel thrilled to contribute to. And so now I'm like, it motivates me to want to keep doing Olam stuff, because it's like, well, that's awesome. And I love this music. It's the music of my childhood. And like, if it's ringing bells for people, I could tell a long story, but basically it happened because we had this tour and we hadn't toured for like 4 years, and the agent just hit us up being like, let's just do a tour for fun. What do you think? It's like, yeah, that sounds great. We didn't have a new record. We had nothing to promote. No reason to do it, just for fun. And the last tour we had done had been kind of in that sort of unknown sort of, some people like it, some people don't, and it was like, oh, okay. And then, but yeah, let's do a tour. That sounds great. And then unbeknownst to any of us, somehow in those 4 years, the record had kind of gained this sort of underground cult following thing. And then all these shows were selling out, and like people like just coming and singing all the instrumental parts at the shows, just like, and then people telling me like, yeah, I was assigned to learn the Olam record for my master's thesis, like stuff at these different, like what university was that? Like Glasgow? Like what? Anyway, it was like total newsflash to me. So seemingly the record has somehow found a little place on the shelf of Irish music records and is there in some way, and it's kind of cool. I've heard like kids playing some of the tunes and stuff, and here and there, and it's like, wow.
I totally agree with you with that thing about getting a response. A negative response is in some ways a better review than an apathetic one. And I think that like so often when I talk to people who are afraid to put stuff out because they're afraid of people not liking it, my response is, the reality is much harder to deal with, which is that it's more likely that nobody's going to care.
Yes.
That's the worst possible feeling, is that nobody hears it. But it's interesting also that, you're contributing essentially to a folk tradition, and folk traditions can only develop in their own timeline. When you put out a record and you want a response, we're playing by the sort of pop music commercial values of, well, what's the review? What did they say? How many streams did it get? But it actually sounds like what it took was, it needed to ride the wave and follow the timeline that folk music takes, which is it needed to slowly be absorbed into the soil and then reveal itself to you and to the people who like that music. And so it's a wonderful success story. Over 10 years, people have come to know the music. That's way better.
Yeah. I mean, man, great insight. You're so right. And I didn't know that was happening. And the weird feeling was to not know that it had been happening and then to suddenly come over and then just be like, wait, what? Like, what is this? But you're so right. It was on a folk timeline. and it is, we're contributing to a folk tradition, and it is essentially folk music still, with just kind of some different instruments. But you're right, that's what it was, and it's actually I couldn't be happier with how whatever we are contributing and however people are valuing what we're doing. I feel great about it. I feel so glad that people, it means a lot to them who appreciate it, and it means a lot to me to be sort of welcomed into that tradition as someone who's not Irish, and to get that sort of like to be welcomed to the table, I guess, it means a lot to me. So yeah.
Do you consider what you hope the outcome is when you're making the music? Like if you're working with Carly Rae Jepsen, is there some sense that this is meant to work in a commercial space? This is meant to compete, as opposed to making the Olam, which is like not necessarily designed to compete with anything. Does it shift the way you approach it? Not
anymore. It used to. Now I feel like I'm familiar enough with just like these different techniques that it feels a little more like what's the vibe, and it's like, okay, they want cabinets, but they want them made out of like obsidian. And it's like, okay, cool. We'll do that then. We'll like combine these things. So I'm still this kind of thinking in terms of theme, variation. And then if it's meant to compete, I'm kind of just thinking about like, well, I just know that means that our container has to be like 3 minutes probably or less. I know that means we got to get to the chorus kind of quick. I know that means, you know what I mean? Like all these things, but it's still, that feels so comfortable to me now that it just fades into the background. It's just sort of like, cool. Like, what's the floor plan? Got it. Living room goes there. Dining room goes there. What's in the living room? Like, could be anything. Still feels like a wide open palette. And I'm still thinking in terms of like, what does it take to bring an idea to a kind of life that is irresistible to people, so that just gets into their soul like as fast as possible. And I kind of want to do that with anything I make, so it doesn't feel like I have to compromise some values to make a commercial thing, which might be the reason why I'll never make a successful commercial thing. We'll find out. It might not actually be a winning strategy, but I don't care. I don't know anything about that Carly Rae Jepsen song other than that I discovered that you worked on it. Yeah.
But when I heard it, I did think, I'm so cynical making pop music. Like sometimes whenever I'm making pop music or around people making pop music, I'm like, I immediately shut off all these like creative impulses, you know? And there are a lot of really slick and creative things that are happening in that track. You know, the guitar sound alone is like way more musical than I think I would have ever taken time to put into a track like that, you know? So in a way, it was a kind of a slap across the face for me to just be like, look, make things well, whatever, you know, whatever the container, as you say, or whatever the materials that you're making it out of are.
Baby, I could praise you, try to turn your head around. Could you take a compliment? Oh. Everything I say you, I find a way to drown it out, make it like an argument. I see you a different way, so take my eyes to borrow.
I mean, I guess I kind of have probably a naive sort of feeling about pop music, which is like the pop music that I love has been very innovative music.
Yes.
And that's why I love it. And at least one of the reasons why I love it is it has that freshness, that vibrance, that creative vibrance in it, that risk-taking kind of essential like necessity almost behind it. Like this person just made this because they needed to, not because it was going to be anything else. And I love that feeling. And so I think of pop music in that way. I think of good pop music as being that bursting creative spirit. That's the stuff that I feel like breaks through. And I'm not actually right about pop music in the sense that like 99.9% of the pop music I hear, I don't feel that way about.
Right, but that's the stuff that you love in the pop space does make you feel that way.
It's funny to say I like pop music because it's actually like, no, I like 0.1% of pop music. And that 0.1% I adore. And the rest of it I could live without for the rest of my life. I don't care at all. And I can totally have a cynical feeling, just to, so you know, like I feel cynical when I hear pop music that's like just the phoning it in stuff, which is so much of it, which is like, okay, here we go, build up, break, instrumental chorus, repeat the hook in the middle of the instrumental chorus, do it twice, okay, like just like this is the most cookie cutter, formulaic, uninspired thing ever. That stuff I feel very like, I don't care to make it, I don't care to listen to it, but the first person who did that, which everybody's emulating,
Yes,
I'm amazed by.
Right.
And that's what's cool. It's like all these things are formulaic just because they're following an innovation. It was an innovation at one point, and whoever did that didn't do it because it had been done before. That's the spirit I try to harness with pop music. It's like it's the Somebody Like You Adele thing where it's like, you know what? Maybe it can be a piano ballad, and maybe that's going to work. Like, who knows? But it has the vibe in there. Or it's like the Skrillex, like, yeah, Where Are You Now? He did with Bieber under the Jack U thing. Like, doesn't follow a pop form whatsoever. What's the chorus? I don't even know. It's just like its own thing. But man, that influenced. I feel like people have been emulating his sounds in almost every damn top 40 thing I've heard for the last 5 years. You know, it's like, wow, what an innovation.
I gave you the key when the door wasn't open. Just admit it. See, I gave you faith, turned your doubt into hope, and can't deny it. Now I'm all alone and my joys turn them open.
In order to become a formula, it's an innovation first. And
Yes.
And that's what we strive. That's what you strive for, is to
Yes.
be the innovation that leads the turns into the formula.
I'd rather try for that than to do the other ones. Because, yeah, if I was doing the other one, I would get pretty bored and feel pretty weird about what I'm doing on the planet. You know, yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that. And we didn't. It's not like I'm saying I have done that, but it's a more fun place it's a more fun spirit to harness, I suppose. You know, when making something that could have a commercial place in the world. So. Yeah, and if nothing else, it's like it's just because it's more fun. You know, why not do it that way?
Right. What are we doing? What are we waking up for? If not,
what are we waking up for, man? What are we waking up for? You know, I think there are people who probably are really excited to make some of those tracks that maybe I think sound formulaic and phoned in.
I think there are people who are excited to make money.
Yeah, and I think there are people excited definitely to make money. Funny enough, it's like there are so many people trying to make songs that sound like the currently popular songs that it's like such a lottery. Chances of making money from it are so low. So I'm like, man, if you're trying to make money, you're better off just learning how to be a plumber. I swear to God, you're going to make more money as a plumber. I guarantee you.
I started earlier this year doing creative coaching with people where I do a very similar kind of conversation to the one that we're having now, but with people who maybe are looking for some guidance in terms of like what they should be doing, how they should be spending their resources, basically just a sounding board.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Pretty much everybody that can afford to do that is, has a day job.
Yeah.
And I want to say to all of them, like, look, you're so successful. You have an income that is independent of making music, and music is just because you love it. Like, don't mess with that.
Yeah.
Don't disturb that, because it's rough. It's rough to try to make money in music.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not easy. I feel like I got very lucky that I'm able to make money, like make a living from music. I know like my partner Anna would be like, shut up, you work so hard. And I'm like, yes, I have worked hard. I know I was born with some sort of like interest and propensity for this, but like I also did get really lucky, and I feel like, I have no advice for people a lot of the time because I'm like, I don't even know how you start now. But before we go, I don't need to rabbit hole about the current environment, professional environment. Like you're absolutely right. Like it doesn't actually, and I think the sort of news flash I have for some people who might be judging themselves on those kinds of lines is just that you would be surprised how little of your time is spent doing the music that you love for the reasons you love doing it when you make a living from it. It actually is probably not more. And I can say, for me, I have found myself to be discovering in certain years of my life, it was actually, less. Yeah. Than if I was just doing it after working a job, So it's an interesting thing to actually think about the amount of hours you have. If you're someone who loves songwriting and you're making a living as a musician, even touring your own songs, but that's how you make a living. You're not going to have as much time to write songs as you think you do, as you would. You're going to be playing a lot of shows, and I don't know many people who can write many songs while they're touring full time. It's pretty hard to do both. So yeah, you're giving good advice, and that's an awesome thing to do. Creative coaching is awesome.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, look, you just walked up to the line of saying that you were talented or that you had any kind of gift, and you wouldn't say it. You said, well, I got lucky and I know I had a propensity and I know that I had an interest, but you didn't say the thing. And I don't blame you for not saying it. Not that I think that you are not talented or weren't gifted or any of that, because I think sometimes the gift is just, first of all, I mean, you might have gotten lucky, but you had to fall in love. Like, it wouldn't have meant anything. Any of what happened in Ireland, for example, wouldn't have mattered if you didn't love it already. And in a way, maybe the gift was just knowing enough to fall in love with that.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. And I've always been confused. I used to not believe in talent. I used to think talent. I do now, but there was a phase where I didn't. But I think the phase actually had some merit to it, which is like, can we really draw a line between what we call talent and what we call enthusiasm? Like, or what you said, like falling in love. Like, it becomes murky for sure. And it's like, if you just fall in love with something and you just do it a lot, you're going to get better at it. And you're not going to be able to force yourself to do something for 10,000 hours that you hate. Someone else can force you, but you're not going to force yourself, So it has to have that love behind it. And I think talent actually probably means some combination of both of them, But that love is, the love is crucial. You have to love it. You have to be in love with it 100% for any of this to really happen, because a lot of it's pretty damn laborious. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, totally. No, and it's funny because, like what's been in my head lately is like one of my best friends from college is not a musician. He's successful in business, and he wakes up early, wakes up at 5 a.m. to play guitar an hour a day before he starts his workday.
Wow.
And he's put in way more hours on the guitar, in the last couple of years, certainly than I have. I'm a professional musician. I should be, but like I have stuff to do, and
totally.
I am not motivated at the end of the day to do that. And, I look at this and I go, well, he's actually more of a musician in some ways than I am right now, because he's motivated to keep the thing in his hands. He's not a professional musician. He's not making his living from it. But the relationship with music is and musicianship is so fluid. And actually, I imagine that in Ireland, most of the musicians that you meet probably are not professional musicians, right?
Yeah, it's a combination, I mean, a surprising amount that I hang with are professional musicians, but not all of them. That's for sure. Not all of them. And they're all augmenting, teaching, touring, recording, random gigs that, not glamorous gigs. It's like a hodgepodge for almost all of them, because... And that's the case for pretty much any musician, right? You have to hodgepodge it. So,
well, I'm a fan, and I've been a fan since before I knew I was a fan. And getting to know your work more deeply to prepare for this conversation has made me only more of a fan. So, thank you for what you're doing.
Man, honestly, great questions, man. I'm just like, it's a lot of insight and great intuition, and I really appreciated just what your questions, how they made me think. Thank you for that.
There he was, my friends. Tyler Duncan. What a nice guy. I'll be back in your headspace again before you know it with another deep dive. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.